Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They wanted my bridge. I built it with my own hands, rated it for peace, not concrete trucks. Then they crossed it without permission, broke it, and blamed me. That was their first mistake. The second, thinking I wouldn't fight back. Here's how one HOA war turned into a full-blown legal siege. I've always believed that if you want something done right, you build it yourself. That's how I ended up spending a whole summer 7 years ago, knee-deep in concrete dust and soaked in sweat, crafting a single-span wooden bridge across the rocky river that slices through my property. 12 acres of West Virginia highland woods, rolling slopes, and a slow, cold stream running straight through the middle. My little slice of Appalachian peace. And that bridge, it wasn't just functional, it was personal. Hand-designed reinforced timber, anchored with stone footings I laid myself, and rated for up to 3 tons. Enough for my pickup, not a construction convoy. After retiring from 2 decades in civil engineering, most of them in bridge inspection and failure analysis, the last thing I expected was to be fighting over the very thing I once spent my life building. But then again, I didn't plan on the HOA. See, when I bought this land, it was out in the middle of nowhere. Just old farmland, a crumbling barn, and that river. The nearest development was a mile off. But a few years back, some real estate outfit bought the land upriver on the opposite bank, cleared trees, paved access roads, and slapped the name Maple Rock Landing on it like it meant something. Then came the signs, the sales brochures, and soon enough, the homeowners association. I never signed up for any of it. My property was outside their plotted boundary. Hell, it wasn't even zoned the same way. I didn't attend their meetings, didn't pay their fees, and I sure as hell didn't want anything to do with their bylaws. I kept to myself, restored my cabin, managed the land, and fished in the evenings when the light was good. It was quiet, clean, mine. Then the first letter arrived, typed, letter-headed, and signed by someone named Karen McPhee, HOA president. Pleasant tone, but artificial. She was reaching out on behalf of the board about a unique opportunity for community collaboration. They were building a shared recreational facility, a pool, picnic area, and clubhouse on a stretch of land right across the river. Problem was, they had no road to get there from the main access. No bridge, no public way in. And that's where I came in. They wanted access to my bridge. Temporarily, of course. Just for construction, just a few vehicles here and there. I could name my terms. They'd even throw in a generous stipend. She made it sound like they were doing me a favor. I read the letter twice, then laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because I could already see where this was going. The next day, I drafted my response, polite but firm. I explained that my bridge was privately engineered, designed for personal and light vehicle use only. It wasn't rated for industrial loads, and repeated heavy crossings could cause long-term damage to its integrity. I also noted, for good measure, that the bridge was listed in the county's property records under my name, not theirs, with clear boundary lines marking it as exclusive private infrastructure. I even attached copies of the design specs and a 2018 county inspection confirming the bridge's load limitations. 3 days later, I got a response. Karen thanked me for the clarity and assured me that alternative routes would be considered. That was that, or so I thought. The next week was quiet. Too quiet. Not the usual kind either. Usually I'd hear distant hammering or trucks from the construction site. But now, nothing. No motion across the river, no workers. I figured maybe they'd decided to delay, or better yet, that they were giving up on the idea. Then, on Saturday morning, something changed. I was on my porch sipping coffee, scanning the tree line, when I noticed tire marks, fresh ones, in the gravel by the bridge. They weren't mine. I walked over slowly. The indentations were deep, spaced wide, much too wide for a normal pickup. That's when I noticed faint oil stains halfway across the bridge planks, and a scratch gouged into one of the guardrails. I crouched down. The marks were recent. Within 24 hours max. Someone had crossed my bridge in something big. I checked my camera by the front gate. No hits, but the bridge trail camera I had mounted on the old sycamore tree by the east bank. I pulled the SD card and slotted it into my laptop. And there it was, plain as day, time-stamped from early Friday morning, around dawn. A cement truck, followed by a flatbed with scaffolding, moving slowly but surely directly over my bridge, and leading the convoy. A black SUV, windows tinted, HOA plate frame. I closed the laptop and stared out at the woods across the water. Somewhere behind that tree line, they were moving forward with their plan, and they thought I wouldn't notice. They were wrong. By Monday morning, my coffee didn't taste the same, not because I'd changed brands, but because I couldn't take a sip without wondering what else had crossed my damn bridge while I was asleep. That river used to be a comfort, a natural barrier. Now it felt like a line they were daring me to redraw. I didn't wait. I made copies of the bridge footage, time-stamped and labeled, and dropped a flash drive in a padded envelope addressed to my lawyer, just in case. Then I walked down the trail with a bucket of industrial-grade orange paint and a set of aluminum warning signs I'd ordered years ago, but never had to use. Private bridge, 3-ton weight limit, no trespassing. I mounted one at each end of the bridge. I also brought out 2 portable steel barricades and planted them firmly on my side, right at the entrance, chaining them together with a padlock for good measure. That afternoon, I typed up a formal notice. No access granted. Structural limitations prohibit heavy use. Liability will be pursued for unauthorized damage. Signed it, scanned it, and emailed a copy directly to the HOA office, as well as the construction firm listed on the truck from my footage. I figured I'd hear back in a day or two, maybe an apology, maybe a denial. I was wrong again. The following morning, my dog started barking like he'd spotted a bear. I stepped onto the porch and heard the low grumble of an engine. Then I saw it. Another truck, this one hauling a load of metal framework, slowly rolling across my bridge like it belonged there. I ran down the slope yelling before the second set of wheels even cleared the far bank. The driver hit the brakes hard, stepped out in a neon vest, and looked at me like I was the crazy one. I told him he was trespassing, that the bridge wasn't rated for that kind of weight. He shrugged and said, "We were told it's fine. HOA cleared it." Some lady named Karen. I asked him if that lady owned the bridge. He said, "No clue, man. I just haul stuff." That bridge groaned under him like a dying tree. I stood there fuming, watching him drive off to the other side of the river, where a clearing had been bulldozed out of the forest. Tarps, pallets, orange fencing. They were setting up a damn logistics base over there, right on the far bank I used to fish from. The air smelled like diesel and broken boundaries. I called the sheriff's department again. The same deputy as last time picked up. Daniels. I told him they were trespassing again, after clear warnings. He hesitated, said it was a complicated matter if the HOA believed they had implied access rights. I told him there was nothing implied about a padlocked chain and 4 signs that screamed, "No trespassing." He said he'd file a report but couldn't send anyone out without escalation. Escalation. I was standing on it. That evening, I installed a second camera. This one aimed directly at the bridge from my porch. Motion-activated floodlights, too. I also emailed Karen McPhee directly, copying my lawyer this time. I included photos of the damage to the guardrail, the tire marks, the videos, the signs, and a copy of the inspection report that clearly stated the bridge's weight limitations. She responded the next day. The tone was sugar-laced, but smug. "Dear Mr. Turner, thank you for your recent communication. We respect your concerns and understand your passion for the property. However, given that your bridge provides the most direct access to a community development site, we have consulted with our legal advisors and believe that limited temporary access is reasonable and permissible under community cooperation statutes. Please rest assured that all equipment used is within the typical range for temporary site preparation." I nearly choked. They weren't just ignoring my warnings. They were justifying the violations and twisting language to make it sound like I was the one being unneighborly. Cooperation statutes? I didn't agree to anything. There wasn't even a damn easement. The next day, I found the chain on the barricades cut clean through. Not broken, cut. Someone had come out with bolt cutters and cleared a path again. They even moved the warning signs, dumped one in the bushes, another into the creek. That wasn't misunderstanding. That was deliberate. I didn't even yell this time. I just turned around, walked back to the house, and called my lawyer. I was done being polite. It rained the next night. Hard. The kind of Appalachian rain that thunders on your roof like an accusation. I didn't sleep. I stayed up in the living room, watching my porch cam feed, listening to the groans of my old timber frame house, while my floodlights carved out 2 ghostly beams over the soaked bridge. I was half hoping the river would rise and swallow the damn thing just to make a point. By sunrise, the sky had cleared, but the air still smelled like mud and metal. I grabbed a thermos and walked down to the bridge. The barricades were gone. Completely gone this time. Not just cut. Removed. The chains, the signs, even the bolts I'd anchored into the dirt. All of it vanished. Only the gouge marks in the gravel and some busted zip ties remained, like surgical scars. The tracks across the bridge were fresh, thick-treaded, muddy, and far deeper than before. It wasn't just another delivery truck. Something heavier had crossed that night. That was the morning I decided to wire a second trail camera under the bridge. I wedged it beneath one of the central joists, angled to catch movement from below and above. A paranoia move, maybe, but I had a feeling these people were counting on the fact that I'd get tired, back down, stop documenting. I wanted every bolt and broken splinter on record. That evening, I reviewed the footage. The first vehicle came through just before midnight, a heavy flatbed loaded with rebar. The second was some kind of tracked loader, too heavy even for county bridges unless specially reinforced. Its treads dragged across my planks like they were marshland. I watched the boards flex and groan, felt my jaw tighten with every creak, and then came the third, a concrete mixer, full. Its drum rotated lazily as it rolled across, wet concrete sloshing inside like a death rattle. You could see the planks bend beneath its weight, nails popping up along the seam, and for a second one of the joists shifted visibly. The entire midspan sagged a good inch under the load, but it didn't break. Not yet. The next morning, I found a printed flyer duct taped to my mailbox. It was from the HOA, signed by Karen herself, an announcement to all Maple Rock Landing residents. It cheerfully declared that community improvements were underway on the far bank, and that a temporary courtesy path was being utilized for construction access. No mention of whose courtesy it was. Just a map with a dashed line directly over my bridge and onto their project site, like it was part of the plan all along. No permission, no warning, just a cartoon path drawn across my property like it was public land. I scanned the document and forwarded it to my lawyer again. She responded within minutes. "We file this week. This is open defiance." I walked back to the bridge that afternoon, soaked in sweat and spite. The boards creaked differently now. One plank near the center had a hairline crack. Not surface. Deep grain. You could see daylight through it. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of saying I'd tampered with anything. But the final straw came the next day. I was in the shed repairing a busted generator carb when I heard the engine. It was deeper, heavier. I dropped the wrench, stepped out, and saw it. A loaded excavator was slowly crawling over the bridge, its treads leaving deep impressions in the timber. A construction guy stood at the edge with a walkie-talkie, watching like a coach at the finish line. I shouted, waved my arms, but it was too late. The moment the back end of that monster reached the midpoint, the bridge gave a long, angry groan, a sound I knew too well. Not stress, not age, structural failure. And then it happened. With a sickening crack, the main support beam sheared just enough to shift the entire span. The rear treads punched through the planks like a boot through a rotted deck. The excavator lurched sideways, metal shrieking, and the whole machine tipped into the river, half submerged in mud and whitewater. A geyser of spray shot up, and the guy inside the cab started shouting. I sprinted toward the wreck, already pulling my phone to dial 911. By the time I got close, the foreman was scrambling to call for help on his radio. The driver had a busted leg, maybe more. His foot was pinned between the pedals and the crushed floor plate. Water was rushing in through the shattered windshield. Emergency crews showed up fast. Paramedics, county deputies, even fire rescue. They stabilized the guy and hauled him out with a rig and pulley. Meanwhile, I stood back on the bank, arms crossed, watching the wreckage hang off the remains of my bridge like a trophy of idiocy. Karen arrived 20 minutes later. High heels on gravel, hair done, smell of perfume cutting through diesel and swamp. She didn't even look at me. She went straight to the foreman, muttered something, then turned to the sheriff on site and pointed in my direction. Then she walked right up to me and said, with venom oozing under her smile, "This is your fault. You knew the bridge wasn't safe, and you let us use it anyway. You're going to pay for this." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The cracked support beam, the shattered railing, the bent steel from the excavator frame, they said enough. They had the nerve to put up yellow caution tape, like it was their crime scene. As if I had anything to do with that machine plummeting into the river besides warning them, in writing, twice, to stay the hell off my bridge. I stood behind the sheriff's car while paramedics pulled the operator from the excavator. His leg was mangled, face pale, groaning as they carried him into the ambulance. I wasn't heartless. I didn't want the guy hurt, but he damn well shouldn't have been on my bridge in the first place. Sheriff Lewis, who'd been with the county longer than I lived here, finally stepped toward me. He took his hat off, rubbed his forehead like he had a migraine, and said, "Osty, this is going to get messy." "You think?" I asked flatly. He sighed. "HOAs claiming they had access rights says you didn't post proper signage, that there was an implied easement across your bridge. I sent them letters, multiple. They cut my barricades and tossed my signs in the damn creek. You saw the chain marks." He nodded. "I know. I saw the footage you sent Daniels last week too. But it's not me you'll be arguing that with. They're lawyering up. Karen's already down at the station filing a formal complaint." I just laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so cartoonishly predictable I couldn't muster a proper reaction. Back at home, I reviewed the underbridge footage again. This time, I noticed something new. Just before the excavator made its final approach, a group of construction workers were shown unbolting one of the secondary side rails, probably to make more space for the treads. What they didn't realize is that those rails weren't decorative. They were part of the lateral stabilization. Remove them, and the bridge has nothing to brace side force. Idiots. I forwarded the footage to my lawyer, and within hours she responded with one sentence: "We're going to bury them." The next day, I received a formal letter, certified mail, legal stationery, envelope too thick for anything good. Inside, a lawsuit from the Maple Rock Landing Homeowners Association. Their claim? That I had knowingly permitted use of an unmarked and structurally inadequate bridge, failed to maintain reasonable safety standards for a visible access route, and had caused financial damages exceeding $300,000. They even added a line about emotional distress suffered by the injured worker. What really got me was the part where they claimed I gave implied verbal consent. According to their filing, a representative of the HOA had a discussion with me in which I did not express opposition to temporary shared access. I nearly tore the page in half laughing. My lawyer, Jo Keller, wasn't laughing. She met me the next day in her Charleston office, wearing her usual gray suit and combat boots. "They're trying to bluff you out," she said. "They think you'll settle, that you're too stubborn to spend the money fighting it. What they don't know," she added, sliding a fat folder across the desk, "is that we have everything we need to go nuclear." Inside the folder were the bridge's deed record, listing me as sole owner and excluding all public access or easement rights. A structural report I'd commissioned back when I first built it, detailing the 3-ton limit and signed off by a state-certified inspector. Copies of the 2 cease and desist letters I'd sent the HOA. One by certified mail, the other hand-delivered and signed for. Video stills of the bridge being crossed by heavy machinery, well above rated weight. And the jewel, a motion capture frame of Karen herself, standing on the bank, telling a foreman, "Get the trucks across before he makes noise again. He can't stop it once we're halfway." I want to countersue, I told Joe. Not just to get rid of this. I want them held accountable. For the damage, for trespassing, for endangering a guy's life. "You're reading my mind," she replied. That week, we filed a counterclaim for $500,000. Our charges: criminal trespass, destruction of property, endangerment, unlawful interference with private infrastructure, and defamation. We added a claim for injunctive relief to block all future attempts to use or claim the bridge. And we named Karen McPhee personally as a party to the action. That must have spooked them, because 2 days later, one of their lawyers sent Joe a letter suggesting we mediate informally. Joe forwarded it to me with a sticky note attached. Not a chance in hell. Meanwhile, I hired a structural engineer to assess the bridge. He confirmed what I already knew. The damage was catastrophic. The central support beam had cracked all the way through. The decking was splintered, the lateral braces sheared. Even if I wanted to rebuild it exactly as it was, I couldn't. We'd need a new foundation poured. The estimate came out to over $100,000, not including rerouting access during construction. So I added that to the claim. The case was scheduled for preliminary hearing in 3 weeks. Until then, all I could do was sit back, document everything, and wait for Karen's house of lies to collapse like my damn bridge did. 3 weeks sounds like a long time when you're waiting for justice, but in the war of attrition, that is HOA litigation, it flies. especially when the other side spends every waking hour trying to wear you down before the first gavel even drops. It started small. An anonymous note in my mailbox typed, unsigned, "Maybe it's time to sell and move. You're not welcome here anymore." I laughed when I read it. The kind of nervous, dry laugh you give when you know something isn't a joke but still hope it might be. 2 days later, a social media post started making the rounds on the neighborhood Facebook group. I wasn't part of it, but a friend who lived on the other side of the county sent me screenshots. It was a picture of my bridge, or what was left of it, taken from the HOA side of the river. The caption read, "Negligent landowner destroys community project and endangers workers. Shameful." The comments were predictable. Calls to revoke my special privileges, questions about whether my land should even have exclusive access, and, of course, wild accusations, everything from tax evasion to secret militia activity. Because, sure, why not? I didn't engage, I didn't respond, but I added defamation to the counterclaim. Then came the inspectors. Not for my bridge, for me. 2 men in button-ups showed up on a Thursday morning with clipboards and polite expressions. County Development Oversight once said, "We're here to check for unregistered structures." Joe had warned me this might happen. Karen was throwing every stone she could find, hoping one would hit something. They were respectful enough, and I had nothing to hide. My permits were in order. The small tool shed I'd built had already been cleared by the county years ago. The inspectors left empty-handed, but the message was clear. The HOA wanted to bleed me dry, one visit, one insult at a time. But then the momentum shifted. Joe managed to secure a deposition from one of the construction crew members, a guy named Rudy, who had operated the concrete mixer. He was pissed about the fall, about the equipment loss, and most of all, about being lied to. Under oath, he testified that Karen personally assured him the bridge was HOA property and fully rated for site equipment. When he asked about the weight limit, she laughed and said, "Don't worry, the old guy's bluffing. He just hates progress." Rudy didn't mince words. She told us to drive like we owned the place. Turns out we didn't. That deposition blew a crater straight through their case. Joe was ecstatic. This puts her in direct contradiction with her own lawsuit. She claimed you gave consent, but she was telling contractors you didn't matter. That's fraud, obstruction, and straight-up recklessness. 2 days later, Joe subpoenaed HOA internal communications, emails, text messages, meeting notes, anything involving the bridge. Their lawyer tried to quash it, citing irrelevance. The judge denied it. Within 48 hours, we had our hands on gold. One email in particular changed everything. It was from Karen to the rest of the board, dated 2 weeks before the collapse. It read, "We need access to that far parcel by month's end, or we risk losing the contractor bid. Turner's being difficult. I've instructed the site crew to begin moving materials across the bridge regardless. If he pushes back, we'll handle it legally. He doesn't have the resources to fight us." Attached to the email was a copy of a faked easement document, digitally altered to include my property and stamped with a forged signature, mine. When I saw it, my pulse dropped 5 degrees. It wasn't just a lie, it was a felony. Joe wasted no time. She added forgery, document fraud, and conspiracy to commit trespass to the amended complaint. Then she forwarded everything to the county prosecutor's office. By the time the preliminary hearing rolled around, the courtroom was packed. Local media had caught wind of the story. Bridge battle turns legal, and a couple of neighbors from both sides showed up out of sheer curiosity. Karen strutted in like she was walking a fashion show, all blazer and pearls, trying to project control. But her lawyer looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. The judge opened with a question. "Has there been any effort to settle?" Joe stood. "Your Honor, the defendant has made multiple documented attempts to stop illegal activity and was met with deception, trespass, and destruction of property. We are not interested in settling. We are interested in full adjudication." Karen's lawyer tried to pivot. "We believe this can be resolved through mediation." The judge cut him off. "Not anymore." He looked down at the files Joe had submitted the day before, lips tightening. "The court is satisfied there is substantial evidence of bad faith on the part of the plaintiff. We will proceed directly to trial." Karen's face went white. As we exited the courtroom, someone from the local paper asked me for a quote. I didn't give them one. I just said, "Check your own damn bridge before you drive over mine." If I ever had any doubts about how far Karen McPhee would go to protect her precious HOA throne, the 6th part of this debacle erased them entirely. 2 days after the hearing, a manila envelope arrived at my gate, duct taped to the intercom post like some kind of ransom drop. No return address, no stamp, just my name scrawled in thick black marker. Inside were 5 printed pages, anonymous of course, containing meeting transcripts from HOA board sessions, not official records. These were phone recordings someone had transcribed, sloppy, typo-riddled, but very real. The first line of the first page? If we can make him look like the obstructionist, the judge will side with us. No one likes a recluse. That was Karen's voice, no doubt. I recognized her condescension from across rivers and time zones. The transcript included conversations about manipulating the board vote, suppressing dissent, even threatening other members with fines if they didn't support the bridge project. Apparently, 2 board members resigned in protest, and she replaced them with close friends who signed whatever she put in front of them. I handed everything over to Jo. She didn't even blink. This, she said, is not a civil case anymore. By Friday, the county prosecutor had opened a formal investigation into Maple Rock Landing HOA for document tampering, financial misrepresentation, and unauthorized property claims. Karen, meanwhile, doubled down. She sent out a mass email to the entire neighborhood claiming that certain parties were spreading misinformation and threatening to derail community development for selfish gain. She called me a bitter loner with a grudge against progress. She really thought she could PR her way out of a criminal case. Too bad the local news loved a good scandal. Saturday evening, a segment aired on Channel 9 titled Bridge to Disaster, How a Private Landowner Took on a Rogue HOA. I watched it over a beer with my neighbor Jeff, who nearly spit out his drink when they cut to drone footage of the collapsed bridge, slow-mo, dramatic music and all. They interviewed Rudy, the concrete mixer guy, who didn't hold back. She said it was her bridge. I just drove where I was told. Now I got a wrecked truck and a messed up hip. Karen, of course, declined to comment. On Sunday, I got another visitor, this time not an inspector or a sheriff. It was Melissa Kwan, a woman I vaguely remembered from an HOA meeting I crashed years ago just to see how insane they were. She used to be on the board. Apparently, she'd seen the news and decided it was finally safe to talk. Melissa handed me a thumb drive and said, I kept backups, emails, votes, audio, everything she didn't want on the official records. She scared most of us into silence. The audio files included a conversation between Karen and her treasurer discussing how to divert reserve funds to pay for the bridge dispute without getting caught in the audit. Karen laughed at one point and said, "He'll rebuild it just to keep us off it. We win either way." Jo had it in the prosecutor's hands within hours. That week, subpoenas flew like confetti. HOA bank accounts were frozen for audit. Karen's emails were locked down by court order, and Jo filed a supplemental motion requesting a temporary restraining order against the HOA accessing any part of my land, including the easement path they'd started pretending they had. The judge approved it the next morning. That same day, 3 contractors pulled out of the HOA's pool and clubhouse project. One cited legal uncertainty, another unpaid invoices, and the last simply wrote, "We don't work with frauds." Karen tried damage control again, calling an emergency meeting and publicly stating that all claims were false and politically motivated. Problem was, by then, half the community had turned against her. Several homeowners walked out mid-meeting, and one guy, a retired Marine, stood up and said, "Lady, if you'd just asked like a person instead of stomping over the guy's property, none of this would have happened." By the end of that week, I had a full restoration plan for the bridge drawn up by an engineering firm. They'd rebuild the span using reinforced steel beams and post-tension decking, strong enough to hold a damn tank, and sealed off from every wheel Karen McPhee ever hoped to roll across it. I didn't think I'd ever see the day when the sheriff's cruiser would roll up my drive just to thank me. It was Tuesday morning when Deputy Hall knocked on my cabin door, hat in hand, face set in that polite but serious way lawmen reserve for messy business. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood a woman in a crisp gray suit with a folder clutched under one arm. She introduced herself as Ada Clark, Assistant District Attorney for the county. They asked to come in. I didn't bother hiding my surprise. "We're opening a criminal case against Karen McPhee," Clark said, no preamble. "We'd like your cooperation." Turns out the forged easement, the financial tampering, and the orchestrated trespass were only the start. Melissa's files opened up a whole different angle. Misappropriation of HOA funds, threats to dissenting board members, even coercion of contractors. What I had thought was a petty land dispute had now spiraled into a multi-felony case. They asked if I'd testify. I said yes before Clark even finished the question. By that afternoon, Karen was served with a criminal summons. I wasn't there to see it, but Jeff from across the way texted me. 3 cruisers, 2 suits, and a very red-faced Karen. Thought you'd enjoy that. Enjoy was an understatement. The trial date for the civil case was still 3 weeks out, but now the criminal proceedings were running in parallel. Jo was thrilled, not because she liked the idea of criminal law, but because it finally painted the full picture of what this HOA president had become, a tyrant with a fake smile and a paper trail full of lies. Meanwhile, the HOA itself was imploding. 2 more board members resigned. The treasurer, the same man who'd helped forge the fund transfers, turned state's witness in exchange for immunity. He handed over spreadsheets showing tens of thousands of dollars diverted without community approval, some of it used to pay off a contractor to falsify inspection reports. The prosecutor's office subpoenaed every HOA financial document from the last 5 years. Karen's personal bank account was flagged for suspicious transfers. Her husband, a real estate broker, tried to distance himself immediately, pulling out of a land deal near the river and publicly stating he had no involvement in the HOA's decisions. It didn't matter. The damage was done. And the public? They weren't buying the poor Karen act anymore. The news kept running stories. One of them interviewed a family that had moved into the neighborhood just 6 months prior. She made it sound like paradise, the wife said. But the first week we got here, she told us we weren't allowed to plant our own trees. Then she asked for a donation for a clubhouse that doesn't exist. HOA members started organizing a vote to remove the entire board. Petitions circulated. Yard signs popped up overnight. No more Karen. Private property means private. And my personal favorite, someone painted on a sheet and hung it across their porch. We support the bridge guy. Guess that's me now. Jo pushed to expedite the civil trial, citing the growing unrest and threats of retaliation against me. One of the construction subcontractors, a man I'd never met, had thrown a rock through my fence gate one night, shouting about ruined contracts. I had it all on camera. The sheriff paid him a visit the next morning. No charges filed, but the message was delivered. In the meantime, we secured a temporary injunction against HOA operations involving common funds. They couldn't spend a dime without county oversight. Karen tried to fight it, filed a motion claiming discriminatory interference, but the judge laughed it out of the courtroom. And then came the real kicker. A representative from the state's Department of Consumer Protection reached out. Apparently, HOA fraud was on their radar after another HOA in the neighboring county was found to be running an illegal dues scheme. Karen's bridge stunt had landed her on their list. So now I had the sheriff, the DA, the county judge, and a state oversight body all converging on one woman and her little suburban fiefdom. I stood on my side of the broken bridge that evening, looking at the twisted rails and sun-bleached decking still slumped into the river. Jeff joined me, hands in his pockets, chewing sunflower seeds like always. "Hell of a fight," he muttered. I nodded. She picked the wrong engineer. The final chapter of this war began with a bang, quite literally, when the first demolition crew rolled in to tear out the debris from the collapsed bridge. But this time, they were my crew, hired legally, paid in full, and not a single member of them had ever met Karen McPhee. They spent 4 days dismantling what remained, pulling out splintered planks and twisted steel like battlefield surgeons. Watching it, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. Not just the weight of wood and iron, but months of stress, retaliation, and HOA lunacy. The new bridge design was already finalized. Post-tension concrete, double-lane pedestrian siding, steel support beams. Stronger, better, and above all, mine. By the time the civil trial came around, Karen looked like a ghost of herself. Gone were the pearls and confident smirks. Her hair was flat, her blazer too big, eyes darting like a cornered cat. She didn't even sit with the remaining HOA board. They had lawyered up separately, desperately trying to claim ignorance and escape the sinking ship. Jo opened with a timeline that made even the judge raise an eyebrow. She walked through every step. The forged access order, the unauthorized heavy equipment, the warning letters I sent, the collapse, the injuries, the fake consent forms, the treasurer's testimony, and the recordings Melissa had provided. Karen's attorney tried to argue community benefit as if that magically overrode property rights and structural integrity. When the judge asked why HOA didn't simply build their own bridge or request a legal easement, the lawyer mumbled something about logistical complications. Joe didn't even need to cross-examine much. The documents spoke for themselves. The highlight, though, was when they played the audio of Karen saying, "He'll rebuild it just to keep us off it. We win either way." The courtroom went dead silent. The judge ruled by the end of the week. HOA's claims were denied in full. Not only was I not liable for the collapse, but they were ordered to pay me $385,000 in damages, plus legal fees, and to cease all unauthorized access attempts permanently. The judge even included a remark that their behavior was reckless, entitled, and rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of property law. Karen tried to appeal. The court rejected it within days. The final blow came from the district attorney's office. A grand jury indicted her on 4 counts: criminal trespass, fraud, financial misappropriation, and falsification of public records. She was taken into custody that Friday, escorted from her home in broad daylight. No drama, no fight, just handcuffs, flashing lights, and a very quiet HOA Facebook group afterward. The HOA's bank accounts remained frozen, pending audits. A special vote was held a month later, and the entire board was replaced. Some residents pushed to dissolve the HOA altogether, but I stayed out of that part. My fight was done. I rebuilt the bridge, just as she predicted, but not to prove anything. I did it for myself, for my land, for peace. The new bridge has reinforced signage on both ends, carved into weatherproof metal, private property, no access without permission. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Ho, not welcome. And, just in case that didn't send a clear enough message, I hung a small wooden plaque from a chain on the entry post. Burned into the surface, built by the owner, destroyed by stupidity, reborn in steel.